So can everybody else hear okay? You can do little reactions if you want. So if people can give me a thumbs up in the reactions to say that you can hear me all right. Great, and lots of thumbs up, so that's good. Cool. Thanks for coming. For those of you who are new and don't know me, my name's Dr. Hilton, and I am the founder of FutureDoc, which is the online course where we help you get into your first choice medical school. So today is going to be obviously interviews is a massive subject at the moment, and that's what we're going to be covering. Well, obviously it's such a big topic that we would probably need 10 of these sessions just to even remotely cover all the material, but we'll get through what I think are some of the key things today. And I will point you towards some resources that you can go towards after to go into the nitty-gritty of all the details. So don't worry, this is recorded, so you can just sit back and listen, and I will send you the recording after, probably be Sunday. So yeah, I'll send you the recording, and we'll be here for about an hour to an hour and a half. Okay, so just to give you a heads up on that. Well, both of us actually, Kenji and I, are both releasing a lot of videos at the moment for interviews. So we've both got some YouTube channels. Mine's quite new, so my following is dwarfed by Kenji's. But I'll just post a link to mine and then Kenji's channels. So we're both releasing lots of stuff at the moment that you can get on, that you can have a look at, all interview related, all really good stuff, kind of like short versions of what we're doing here. So I'll just give you a minute to quickly go and subscribe to those and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any, because we bring out quite a lot, and yeah, we don't want you to miss out on any of those. Lots of good stuff in them, like good little gems of information. Now that we've got that and given you all those resources, let's get going with the actual presentation. So what I'm actually going to do is, I know that last time, I don't know if you were here for the medical ethics talk we had last time, and that was really brilliant. And that was an hour and a half of Ryan just giving his really great presentation on that, which was lots of slides. I thought today that instead of doing slides and having a bit of a death by PowerPoint, I've actually just got a few notes here to kind of keep me on track. And I'm just going to talk through all the aspects of the interview that I think are the most important you need to know now for this climate and what's going on at the moment. And then what we'll do is go through we'll take one of the subjects and kind of do a bit of a superficial graze of it. And then we'll do some, just to give you the basics, and then go through some scenarios and how to tackle them. Okay, and then I'll tell you how you can kind of go into depth with all of these subjects later at the end of the presentation, or the end of the chat, should I say. Okay, cool. So I think one of the basic and general things that we need to know is how to prepare for these interviews. Now, it's the most generic advice to kind of give you stuff, how to prepare, how to come across, some general tips, but it's actually the most important, because things like creating a good impression, dressing appropriately, having a good structure to answer your questions. These are the foundations that are going to make you deliver really good answers, perform really well at interview. So although you might hear them a lot, these are the basics that you need to get right, because you can know lots of information, but if you're not coming across well, it doesn't give a good overall impression and give people and people are less likely to score you favorably in your interview because of that. So how do we prepare for interview? Well, I would say that there's a few subjects that you need to make sure that you are very well read on and are prepared, okay? So these include medical ethics, your work experience, and prepare how you're going to talk about those. Then things like the multidisciplinary team, teamwork and leadership, knowing stuff about the NHS, personal insights. So they'll ask you about experiences and how, what you've learned from those, which is a really good one. Teaching and explanation stations, breaking bad news, empathy, professionalism, and medicine as a career. So, yeah, like I say, I will show you where you can learn in depth about all of these and for each module how to answer questions. But these are the areas that you need to be polished up on. And then, so going through some general techniques, here are some things that you need to be thinking about really is, like I said, your appearance and your first impression are really important. I have sat on interview panels for many years, and I hate to say it, but it is true. Within the first 30 seconds, you can get a good grasp of whether you are going to offer that person a place at medical school. Kenji, do you have kind of any thoughts about that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think honestly, within the first probably 5 to 10 seconds, I think not just with interviews, but just generally in life, 5 to 10 seconds, someone will immediately have a vibe of, of who you are and how you present yourself. So that's really, really important. And it's, it's little things. It's not the big things. It's little things like walking in, smiling, shaking their hand, and really paying attention. So I'm trying to meet people on the chat as well, and trying to, really pay attention to the person you're talking to. And these small things are what really all add up for them to have a good impression of you. Because when you leave the interview, what's really important is that they're not necessarily going to remember what you say, but they're going to remember how you make them feel. And if you make them feel like you're a good person, you're very confident, you come across very well, that will have more of a lasting impression on who you are as a person compared to, just what you're saying. So it's a balance between, what you're saying, but also how you're coming across.
That's so true. That's a very good point, actually. I've heard that lots of times, is that people will remember how you made them feel rather than what you said. That's so true. That's true of like going to a concert. That's true of any life experience. When you go on holiday somewhere, you remember how you felt about the place rather than the actual things that you did most of the time. So very good point. And yeah, and then, part of the general techniques is how you structure your answers. Now, I have a technique called scare. So don't be scared, or scare them into a good answer, or scare tactics, maybe you want to call it. And that's when they ask you to tell me about a time when, is to talk about a situation, talk about the challenge that you faced, then the action that you took, the result that you achieved, and then evaluate that result and that action. And that's a good way of reflecting. And the important thing about that is the reflection is really what you learned and how that will apply to being a good doctor, and how it will help you with a career in medicine, or what it taught you about a career in medicine. So yeah, that's a really good tactic to answer, a good structure to answer most questions. So then I'll move on to, and again, this is briefly touching on general stuff, and then I'll dive into the next topic, which is preparing specifically for online, and I'll be a bit more detailed with that. But these are some general things that you want to be having in the back of your mind while you prepare, because obviously, as I say, I can teach you lots of stuff, but preparation is key. You need to take all the principles that we teach and go away and practice. And the more you do, the better you'll perform because of it. So absolutely take these principles and go and do them for yourself. Practice with friends, practice with people at school, like your teachers who are willing to interview you, practice with parents, anybody who will let you, okay? So the first element of practice is, I always say, practice rather than rehearse. So any questions that you have answers for, by all means, do them as many times as you need, but never rehearse a script. So the way to, and I have it when I speak on camera, I speak much better when I have some points that I want to say, and I know those points, and I speak freely around those points, rather than try and remember neat little lines, or I'm trying to think to remember the script and I'm not really present. And the other thing with that is that when you are trying to rehearse scripts and kind of reel them off, you tend to not listen to the question as much. And that makes you reel off this bit of script that actually you've crowbarred into a question that actually wasn't relevant. And when you listen to the question back, you think, actually, that wasn't the question they were asking. So I think having bullet points prepared and points you want to say makes you a lot more relevant and a lot more in the moment and adaptable. So that's the first thing. Any comments on that, Kenji?
Yeah, just going off that point. So I think it's going to be very obvious to the person who's assessing you as to which cohort of people have actually memorized something word for word and come across as a robot, and which sort of people have written, like you said, written a few points down and then elaborated on that. And it's a very clear kind of dichotomy between the two. People who've prepared and people who've memorized scripts. And it'll be very, easy to come across, especially with online interviews where they can't see like your body language, your body expression. It's going to be really important to make sure that you are, preparing an answer by bullet points, not as a script, but the main points you want to get across in every single situation. Try remember that, and then kind of work from there. And it's the same thing like when I have my medicine interviews. I know what are the main boxes I need to tick. What are the main things I need to hit, but also make sure that I'm human and make sure that I am coming across as not someone who memorized a script, because it'll be very, very obvious to tell.
Yeah, it's absolutely, and I found this, and speaking to other interviewers, it's a common, probably the number one most disliked, the number one pet peeve of interviewers is people who are coming across rehearsed and robotic, or maybe definitely people who lie. Yeah. Those are the top two.
And the way to kind of get around that, I think, is again practicing to speak to people. So the way to come across as not robotic and not someone who's memorized a script is to practice with your friends. And the more you practice, the more fluid you become with delivering what's on your mind, through your mouth and to the actual interviewer. So that all comes with just practicing as much as you can to come across natural. And also I think just doing it in front of the mirror and talking to yourself on the mirror and seeing how you come across, and or recording yourself on video. All those little things will come with practice and will allow you to come across as kind of natural but prepared at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. I think the filming thing was something I was just about to say. Yeah, and filming is great because what you want to do is get instant feedback. Watch it back straight away, because sometimes you feel like you're coming across. You'll either be completely blind to something that you're doing, or you'll feel like, oh, I'm standing like a right idiot here, and feeling like you want to stop. But actually, you'll watch it back and think, oh, I wasn't as bad as I thought there. So yeah, there's no kind of lying in on the camera. You will see in the cold light of day how exactly you're coming across, and that's great because it gives you honest feedback, and then it really helps you improve when you know the truth of how you're coming across.
Definitely.
And then, I just had a question on the chat actually about how do these apply to online, and that's exactly what we're going to go through in depth. That's going to be our deep dive subject. So I've just got a couple more points to talk on the general stuff, and then we will be going into depth about the online stuff. Okay. So then, obviously, things that are massively going to help you is going through your personal statement in depth. And I would encourage you to even do that now, because the way things are going, you may not be invited to interview until March, and you've fairly recently written and submitted your personal statement. So it's still going to be very fresh in your memory. You can look at it analytically now from all angles and think, put yourself in the interviewer's shoes and think, if I was an interviewer, what would I ask this person? What could possibly come up? If you've spoken about a specialty that you shadowed, or you've spoken about, say an article that you've read, and it's on a particular subject, well, there's a good chance that they'll ask you not really detailed questions, but maybe to give a brief summary of your understanding of that subject, to show that you're not just throwing it in there for the sake of it, and actually you are, you know what you're talking about when you put something like that in your personal statement. So going through your personal statement is a really good one. I've got some university-specific guidance that I'm just about to release a blog post on. Bless you, Kenji.
I stuck myself for a second.
um, so I'll share the blog post later this week about what kind of questions you want to ask specific for that university, and what a university might ask you when they say, why do you want to study here? And then the final point is, in the run-up, I mean, there's only one subject in the news at the moment, but in the run-up to your interviews, for the months preceding it, you really want to be hot on the news of what's going on. So every few days, just go on BBC Health, see what's going on in the world related to health, and just have a read of a few things. Make sure you're aware of what's going on, and have a couple of articles that you've done a bit more digging on and you've read a bit more about, so that if they say, are there any articles, and that doesn't necessarily just have to be BBC News, it can be, you know, New Scientist magazine or something, you know, for example, the Student BMJ, or whatever it is that you want to, a medical related magazine or science related magazine, and just have something that you can talk, you know, for a couple of minutes on, if you got asked questions, and have some intelligent opinions about it. Any comments?
I think Student BMJ is really good. That's just one of the big things. Different journals like Nature, like the Nature Scientific Journal, you can go on to like health on there as well. More general things, like you said, like BBC Health, CNN Health, those are all really, really good websites to get started on that. Also, just generally, like even YouTube. I mean, there's a lot on YouTube of what's currently going on with health and in the world, and there can be good summaries as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kenji does a lot of stuff as well. Well, we both are upping our YouTube game at the moment. Kenji's absolutely killing it, and I am trying to replicate his hustle, because he's doing really well. Cool. So now let's talk about adapting to online interviews. Obviously, a massive subject at the moment, because everything is now going online. Pretty much every university have announced that they're doing an online interview this year, this cycle. And the thing to know is it's not completely new and unheard of, because a lot of the international interviews are done online. So it's not something that they're completely unfamiliar with. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of how you adapt to the new format that it's going to be, that the universities are going to put it in, and just how to prepare. So let's see. Firstly, so I'm just going to go through some little notes that I've made and then kind of riff around those. Okay. So firstly, I'd say the overall thing about online interviews is you have to approach it from what could possibly go wrong, and how do I do everything in my power now in preparation to prepare for it. And that's not to panic you, but that's, you know, to make sure that you're prepared. Okay, so you crossing the T's and dotting all the I's there, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, should I say? The first thing to realize is that universities doing MMI format will continue to do MMI. And actually, whereas you would normally be rotating around the stations, the stations will be rotating to you. So be prepared to still do MMI in the same format, and it's just going to be online on your computer, okay? And the other thing I would say is, don't fall into the trap with these interviews of thinking that it's going to be easy or easier than normal. And just because you're in the comfort of your living room, it doesn't mean that the material is going to change. It's not going to be any different to the material and the rigor of questions that come up. So don't use it as an excuse to slack. Just prepare as you normally would for any important event in your life, any exam or anything like that. Just make sure you're doing the prep, and don't feel like it's going to be any different just because it's online, okay? Now, the first thing that you want to consider is, and this kind of comes under the impression that you give, and that is the location. Now, you have to choose somewhere in your house that will say something about you. Now, I'm not trying to say you need to make a statement, but obviously you don't want to have a really messy room in the background or anything that gives an impression that maybe you're not tidy, or anything that can give negative connotations. So you have to pick a room that's clean and tidy, ideally with a neutral background, these sorts of things that don't clash with how you're looking on camera. Now, the other thing to bear in mind with that is the clothes that you wear, because things on screen look a lot louder than they do in real life. So we always say don't wear garish, outlandish clothes anyway for a med school interview. You have to look. My surgical mentor always said to me, you need to just look very, very sober. And it's the same. I mean, it would be the same in real life, and it's the same on here, if not more so. So neutral colors to make sure that you don't stand out, that it's not overly stand out on screen. Okay. You want to make sure that the room that you're in is free of distractions. Now, there's so many disruptions and distractions that you can have. And you really need to get the whole family on board and tell them how important this day is, and this next hour or however long it will be is going to be. Okay. So, I mean, it's simple things like turn off all potential electronic distractions. So phone switched off. Firstly, I would say don't do the interview on your phone if you can. I'd say definitely use a laptop, because for a few reasons, phone doesn't kind of give you it's just a small screen, and it doesn't give you the usability. And also, if you're holding it, especially, it looks terrible if it's wobbly. So I'll talk about backup options, but as a primary, I would say use a laptop, because the other thing is that they may ask you to do like they do for the UCAT sometimes, for the home UCAT testing, they ask you to flip your use your webcam and do a pan around the room to show that there's nothing that's helping you cheat. So it would be very difficult to do that with a big iMac, for example. So laptop with a webcam is usually the best way to do that. So yeah, and so avoiding distractions. So turn your mobile phone off, and make sure that the house phone's turned off. Even things like I live in a flat, and make sure the buzzer, I can mute my buzzer or like take it off the hook. There's nothing worse than you see it on podcasts where people are clearly recording on Zoom and someone's left their laptop notifications on and they're getting dings every 5 minutes, how distracting that is. And not that it will score unfavorably for you, but it's distracting for you more than anything when you're nervous and you're trying to think of answers and you might be getting a bit grilled. Having that to think about is just not what you need. So these are all the things that you can plan for to make it as comfortable for you as possible. Even silly things like making sure you don't have that your parents haven't ordered Tesco shopping to come at the same time as the interview. Just make everybody in the household aware what's going on, and that it's a really important thing, and they need to try and limit their impact on your interview as much as possible. Kenji, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned some really, really good points. Just to add on that, I think, so what I would personally do, I think it's down to your personal preference. What I would still do is try to dress smart. So even if you can wear a suit, so I wore a suit to my interview, and I know it's a bit strange because you're at home, but I think you want to still come across presentable, because even if I have like medicine meetings on Zoom, I still dress smart for those things. So I think that would just make you stand out and make them realize you've added a bit more effort. Also, just little things like making sure you have had a haircut, you're looking presentable. I know it's a bit more difficult, because of lockdown and like it's all shut and stuff like that. But just try to be as presentable as you can be. And then so men, I'd say wear a suit if you can. Females, the equivalent of that. And it's one time in your whole entire career where you have to show they've given you everything, and little things like, again, like you said, not arranging your Tesco delivery to be at the same time you're having the interview is so important. It's the one time your whole entire life you get to do well, and there's no kind of retakes for that year. So just make sure that everyone in your household is aware of the situation. Make sure that you are as well. And also make a plan as to what to do if things go wrong. So if your Wi-Fi cuts, what do you do? Do you have a Wi-Fi hotspot that you can quickly turn on to bring the Wi-Fi signal back up? What do you do when these things go wrong? Can you have maybe your mum in the next room? So if someone does knock on your door, ring the doorbell, your mum is there to sort out what needs to be done to make sure that it's not interrupted. So have a plan as to what to do if things do go wrong, to make sure that things don't go wrong, and if they do, you know how to solve it, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. That was something that was going to come on to, but yeah, great point. So have a plan A, plan B, and even plan C. So yeah, have your phone at the ready to do. And like I say, phone's not an ideal first option, but obviously if your laptop fails, then definitely have it ready, and maybe get a little tripod or something so that you're not holding it and it's all wobbly. So that's a good way to do it. And then as an ultimate backup, have the number of the university. If all else fails and you can't get back on, you can't rejoin the interview, just at least have the number ready to call the university and explain the situation to them, and they might be able to slot the last part in, or at least they know that you've not just bailed because it was going badly. So yeah, I predict that it's going to be a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. I imagine there are going to be technical glitches left, right, and center. But obviously, you got to do as much as you can to make sure that that's not you. So part of the location as well is the room that you're in. So you'll know what time of day your interview will be. So make sure you're in a room, ideally with natural light, facing out to a window. So the window coming in, the light is beaming off you. So you don't want the opposite. You don't want the Jesus light where it's casting a shadow behind you. So your facial expression is in the shadow and you can't be seen. Okay, these are little things that will make the nice little touches to make that impression. So if you know the time of day, you want to practice, do a trial run on the time of day that your interview is, because you might have glare in the room. The sun might come in at a certain time and actually have a massive glare and actually make it not usable at that time of day. Or, for example, if you wear glasses. Now, I'll show you. I'll tell you what my backup is. So we'll be doing these interviews in winter. So it might be dark. You might be doing it at 4 o'clock. It might start getting dark. So actually, I will show you the difference between, I'll show you my setup here. So I use a ring light here because it was actually quite a nice gift from a patient. But yeah, really nice. Wow. So I'll show you the difference. If I can turn this off briefly. And the difference between like this and this, like the way it presents on video is quite big. And in the winter, when you'll be doing interviews kind of at 4 o'clock, it might still be going on and it's getting dark, you might lose all the light. So it's maybe just something to consider. Not an absolute necessity.
I've got like
you can just use a lamp. It's just
a lamp, yeah.
Yeah, and like I say, this is all thinking about every eventuality, and these are all little touches that you can make that will contribute to the overall impression that you create during the interview. Okay. So yeah, and then things like, for example, when I wear my glasses, there's a massive glare from that light. So things just to consider and finding the setup that works for you. Okay.
You may have already mentioned this, Ash, but I think also just arranging a mock. So get your, one of your friends or your mum to be in the next room and go onto whatever software you will be using, whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever, and try set up everything as it would be. Connect with your mum and get used to the program you're using, so that on the day, it's not your first time using the program. You know how to connect everything. You know how to configure your microphone, test your microphone, test your speaker, test your webcam, test everything. Arrange a mock, over chat with your mom or friend, and then when it's actually the actual day, you're used to the system and you're used to how it works.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that was another point. Yeah, Kenji's smashing it because he's got all the points, the same points as me. And so yeah, that was one of the things I was going to come on to is that you want to find out, yeah, the exact platform, get familiar using the platform, stress test all the little buttons, because if you accidentally click on something and don't know how to get out of it, you'll panic. So learn how, what buttons do what, and if you accidentally click on something, how to get back out of it. And yeah, do a trial run so that you know that the internet's working okay, and that your internet can support that. And I'll talk a little bit about the technical stuff as well in a minute. So body language as well is a really important part of interviews. And actually, when I'm talking about like lighting in a good room, this, for example, is not a particularly good room to be doing it because I've got this horrible light behind my head. It's just where my desk is set up. So if I was actually doing an interview, I probably wouldn't set it up here. So that's an aside. On the subject of body language, how you frame the shot for your video interview is going to make a big difference. So actually what you want is, there's a technical term for this. I think it's called mid-frame. And what you want to be is, try and get it so that I'm getting it right for here. So you want to be a fair bit back and kind of about here. Yeah. So between belly button and nipple needs to be at the bottom, and then just a little bit of breathing space above your head. And the rationale for that is that you can see my body language like this. So, we talk about positive body language, which is sat upright, shoulders back, hands on laps, and sat slightly forward. You can also see negative body language. You can see if I'm looking cross-legged, like, well, you can't see my legs, but if I'm looking a bit too casual, if I'm slouched, or if I'm sat on my hands, you can still see all that stuff. So having good framing allows you to get your body language across. So it's an important thing to think about where you sit in relation to the camera. So let's see what else I wanted to talk about. So yeah, adapting to camera. So this is specifically now with how the actual interview goes. So remember, there's always a lag. Like even now, when Kenji and I are going back and forth, it's not like normal conversation where one ends and then one quickly takes up the other end of the conversation. There's a lag. So after every question, you need to make sure that you have a pause. Now, when they're asking a question, just give it a little second, just a slight pause to make sure you definitely know that they've finished speaking, that you avoid speaking over each other. So just a little pause to allow them to finish their question and then start. And then the same when you're finishing your question, finish your piece and then just give them a little nod to say, okay, like, I'll be a great student because of this. And then nod just to kind of let them know that you've finished. Because these are the kind of ways that you have to adapt a little bit online to these sorts of things. Kenji, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that you pretty much summed it all up, to be honest. Yeah, I think I'm quite happy with what you said.
Cool. So the other thing is, it's obviously not possible to make direct eye contact with the individuals, but what you can do is you can see this now as you're seeing me talk. So there's a big difference between me looking. So now I'm looking directly down the barrel of the lens of my webcam in my laptop. Okay, and there's a big difference between doing that and doing this. You can see me looking. I'm looking at the middle of my screen now, and it's not quite as engaging because when I look down the barrel of the lens, it feels like I'm looking at you. I'm sure, well, I'm sure you would say that. It feels like I'm looking directly at you like this, and I'm connecting with you. You feel like I'm making eye contact with you. So get into the habit of when you're talking, speak directly to the lens, okay? Now, it's difficult because you're trying to gauge people's reactions. And so my advice would be this: when you're talking, speak to the lens. look at the lens. You can occasionally glance at the screen to look at their reactions. But then when they're talking, it's okay to look at the screen. And you can do a bit of both, but you can look a lot more at the screen when they're talking than when you're talking. Yeah, so other things that I wanted to mention is adapt your speech. Make sure that you speak more clearly, a bit slower than normal, because it's just harder to pick up on online interviews. So these are good ways to just come across better when you're interviewing online. Yeah, and then let's see, any other points that I wanted to make. It's obviously important to let them know if you're having technical difficulties. So don't struggle through it if it's impacting the way that you are answering your questions. So make sure you let them know, because there's nothing worse than kind of like struggling through and then you're not really listening because you're trying to deal with something, or you can't hear them properly and you answer the question incorrectly. So just be very, it's a sign of maturity to say, look, I'm really sorry, but the connection's terrible. I just can't hear what you're saying. So things like that. And then just one thing I remembered in terms of body language, a very easy thing to do when you're
I'll be right back. Sorry, something really important. I need to receive the door. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no problem. Good job he's not got an interview going on at the moment, because like I said, no Tesco shopping while you've got interviews on the go. But yeah, so like things like it's very easy when you're listening to someone to just cover your face like this, or put your hands over your mouth. So many things that people do when they're concentrating that they're not conscious of. So really important to just be aware of all these things, all these little things that, again, what we're doing here is creating an impression of you being a professional and you being someone who's a good candidate to go to medical school. So anything that you can do to, these little things that you can do to contribute to that are going to make a huge difference. Okay. Let's talk about some technical stuff.
Don't do what I did for your interviews.
What were you having? Was it the Tesco shop?
No, it was an Amazon thing I've missed so many times because I'm actually home today. So
Kenji's going to do a live unboxing after this.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, then technological stuff. So as you could see, when I flip my camera around, you can see there that I have a laptop stand, and that means that the camera at the top of my screen is eye level, and that makes a big difference as well. Making sure that they're picking up the sound properly. So you might need a little microphone, but remember, if you're going to put a microphone in, you'll need headphones as well, because it can't do both ways normally. Yeah, making sure that you don't have any echoes in the room, things like that. These are all little touches to make sure everything's kind of running as smoothly as possible.
Someone asked about someone on the chat asked about earphones. In regards to earphones, I don't really think it makes much of a difference, to be honest with you. I probably wouldn't wear like huge like Bose headphones like I have here. Like I probably wouldn't wear one of these. But if you have earphones or AirPods, I don't think it makes much difference. But what do you think, Ash, on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, like, for example, if I put these bad boys on, I don't know if I've got a tiny head, so it might make it look even smaller. But I think, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think you'll get marked down for having big headphones if you're genuinely having difficulty hearing properly. And you kind of just say, sorry about the big headphones. You can make a joke about it, but I agree. Yeah, it's probably earphones, if you're going to use them, is better. But I'm sure if you could charm your way into using headphones.
Yeah. The other things I'd say is with earphones, if you're using AirPods, you have the added worry that the batteries might die, or you may have like a technical issue. So if you are using something in your ears, make sure it's reliable, or use the speakers.
Yeah, and that reminded me of some. Yeah,
Yeah.
that reminds me as well. And make sure that all your devices are charged. So make sure your laptop's got full charge, and just in case, for example, you don't realize that you've not plugged it into the mains, and then at least you know that you've got the battery to get you through. Silly things that you would just absolutely kick yourself if
Yeah.
you and your laptop.
I would probably go for like as many wired connections as you can. Like on my desk, everything is wireless and they can all die. So if I'm doing something really important, like everyone who I spoke to about the UCATs, I always told them like have a wired mouse, like spend £5-10 on a wired mouse and wired keyboard if you are on a monitor. And if you are on a laptop, then obviously that's fine. But just make sure you are, I think, limiting as many issues that could possibly go wrong.
Yeah. And then the last little bit about the technical side of things is make sure you maximize your internet speed. And by that, I mean, make sure you've not got a brother or sister in the next room streaming Netflix or downloading a massive file, things like that are just going to absolutely cane your internet speed. It's recommended that, I think Pearson VUE say that you need at least 1 megabyte per second internet connection to be able to support the online video platforms in the way that they want to use them for interviews. So go on Google and find, there are lots of, which for example will let you check your internet speed, but go on Google and find out your internet connection speed to make sure that you've got enough to support it. And like I say, make sure that there's nobody else on there, taking up your data, so that it's not being able to support the platform. And then I guess I think that's most of it. I can have a look at some questions. I think the three things that can happen, that can go wrong as well, that are outside of your control, that someone, like if you have small children that live in the house, like someone comes into the room and disturbs you, you can say like, things like that. You can definitely, again, there are ways to laugh it off. If it's a small child, no one's going to hold you accountable for that, and just say, oh, I'm sorry, blah, blah, and get them out of the room as quickly as possible, and then just carry on with the interview.
And if that's the case, definitely let them know beforehand, when you start the interview, or even before, like you possibly email in and say, I'm really sorry, due to circumstances, this is a situation, so if you're starting an interview, you can say, if you're a mother or a father, you can say, listen, I've got a young one in the room. They're aware of the situation, but in case of any emergencies, I'm just letting you know beforehand. And that comes across way better than some random, distraction coming, randomly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, connectivity is probably one of the most unpredictable things. That's why we say have a plan B and a C. And, if it comes to it, then they'll probably let you rearrange if you've got a connectivity issue. But it's just something that if we can do everything within our power to make sure it doesn't happen, then they will understand. I think they will have lots of people who will have this issue. And so don't get too stressed out about it, but just have a checklist of everything you want to do to make sure you're going to do everything within your power, so then you can relax and know that, well, I did everything I can. And then if I'm unlucky, then they will ultimately be able to reschedule for you. And the final thing that is probably out of your control is if you have any background noise. So loud siren. I live in London, so literally it's like a siren a minute outside my window. So just, if that goes on, no one's expecting you to control that. Just wait until the loud noise is gone, and then just say sorry and carry on. If it's stuff, you might, for example, if you have roadworks that have started the day before or the day of, you'll just maybe have to explain that to them and try and find a different room in the house, or maybe just explain and say, look, can we reschedule, because I didn't know that these roadworks were starting today, and you probably couldn't have known. So people will be sympathetic to all the weird and wonderful ways that things could happen in this unusual and first time attempt at doing most of the bulk of these interviews online.
Yeah, and what I imagine will happen, because I think a lot of them are becoming panel interviews as well for COVID. So it'll be one-to-one a lot of the time with, well, possibly a lot of the time with the interviewers. And I'm sure they'll allow like a 20-minute gap between each interview to allow for these things to happen. So I wouldn't worry too much if things do go wrong. Just don't panic and try to talk with the person to sort out whatever issue comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, like I say, people will be sympathetic, but yeah, this is all about doing our best. So that's it, really. I'm going to be releasing lots of resources on this. There's a lot more detail that I can go into, and there are a few little more nuanced things that I can talk about at a later date. But I think that gives you, 80% of what you need to make sure that you're performing adequately and online interview styles aren't hindering you. So was that useful, guys? If you want, give me in the reactions, just give me a little thumbs up or a clap if you think that was helpful. I'll have a look at some questions. We still got a little bit more to go. I can take maybe a question or two if you'd like.
Yeah, send us some questions.
Well, lots of thank yous. You're welcome, guys. That's my pleasure. Do you think anything about Edinburgh? Do you know anything about Edinburgh? So last I was aware, Edinburgh weren't interviewing. I don't see. If anything, it would be a convenient time to stick to that for Edinburgh. I haven't heard anything new, but I don't see that will change.
I think loads of people on the chat were asking things about like who's received interviews, who's received rejections, and I wouldn't worry too much about that, because a lot of the times they release interviews out in batches. So I was really, really worrying that I wouldn't get an interview from King's, but I was the last batch to be interviewed, so I didn't hear back until March. So as long as you haven't been rejected, like I wouldn't worry about it, and I'll try not to compare it to other people, where they're out and if they've received interviews, because it doesn't make a difference if someone interviews before you or not.
Yeah, that is a surefire way to stress yourself out. So I would just wait. It'll be fine, and the chances are that you will get something. And yeah, like I say, I've same as Kenji actually. I was the last batch for pretty much every interview I've done. I've been the last batch, and I'm a Hilton, so alphabetically it doesn't make sense, and I submitted it early. So I don't know. Maybe it's just karma. Sorry.
So Fariba just had a question to Kenji. When did you start preparing for your interview? I think I started in November time. I started in November because I was on the kind of like guaranteed interview scheme for Birmingham. So I got a guaranteed interview before because I was already at Birmingham for my undergrad. So I knew for certain I had an interview in January, but even if I didn't, I definitely would have started probably November time. You want to give yourself as much time as possible to prepare, especially because of COVID and because of things changing right now. And also depends on you. So for me particularly, I was still in my final year degree. So I knew for a fact that as soon as I head back to term, I'll have so much things going on and I'll be so busy. So because of that reason, I knew I had to start preparing early. So of course, if you're taking a gap year and you have more time, then you can wait a bit longer. But the earlier, the better, I'd say.
Yeah. Cool. So let's go. We're going to do some questions now. So if you're feeling brave, I'm going to give you a little bit of guidance first as to how we're going to tackle these. But we're going to talk about the subject of professionalism. Now, again, it's not as much of a deep dive as we'd like to, but like I say, honestly, there are about 12 subjects that you need to be pretty hot on, and we could talk about each one for a couple of hours. You saw last month when we did the medical ethics one, we went for an hour and a half and probably could have gone on for much longer. So we'll try and do a very initial and superficial rough guide to professionalism, okay? So let me talk a bit about professionalism. So as a doctor, it's important you are going to be present, and as a medical student, you're going to be there for some of the most important moments of people's lives, for good or for worse. Kenji's, you're on obs and gynae at the moment, aren't you? Yeah. So is there witnessing on the labour wards, witnessing some of the happiest moments of people's lives. And then obviously I work in A&E, and I see some of the most tragic of people's lives. And it's important that you can act in a professional manner to be able to be around those and not impact those situations negatively. And that's why professionalism is really important. Now, the GMC gives some really good guidelines on professionalism. And it's important to know actually that they don't just provide them for doctors, they provide them for medical students as well, which is important for you to realize, because you guys need to be aware that the guidance, it applies to you as soon as you get to medical school. It's not just for when you graduate. And the GMC are thinking about how you behave from day one. So the more you're aware of that, and the more that you can show that it's important, and you have the characteristics to embody those behaviors, the better it will serve you at interview. So according to the GMC, the duties of a doctor fall into roughly 4 categories, and they are knowledge, skills, and performance. And that kind of goes without saying. You have to know how to treat patients and have certain skills to be able to bring them to better health. Safety and quality, so to make sure that you're treating patients safely and with dignity and keeping them comfortable. Communication, teamwork, and leadership and partnership is another one, because obviously you're just one person in a massive team that's giving care to the patients. That your role is a very, actually, well, a significant but a relatively small part of the entire picture of providing healthcare. And then maintaining trust. It's really important that doctors are honest and are trustworthy. And why is that important? Well, when think about a patient who comes to you, a lot of the time you're going to be, let's say someone comes in and they're septic, so they've got an infection somewhere, they've got a high temperature, they're clearly unwell. You want to know where that infections come from. So you're going to have to ask them about their urinary habit, so how much they're weeing, if it's stinging. You're going to have to ask them about their bowel habits. You're going to have to ask them disgusting stuff like what colour the phlegm is that they're coughing up, things like that, because it's important, A, to know so that you can make a diagnosis, but also important for them to feel comfortable enough to tell you those things. Because if they don't tell the truth, then it could send you barking up the wrong tree, and then either misdiagnosing and mistreating or missing something. So that's an important, that's the main reason why the GMC are there to regulate the people are embodying professionalism and the core values. So a lot of the questions that you'll get about professionalism in the med school interviews will be kind of a "what would you do" type scenario. Okay, so there'll be kind of like SJT sort of questions, and you can get anything from ranking stations to just something where you just ask to talk about it, or a role play scenario. And we've got a couple of those now that we're going to go through with you. But first, I would want to give you an approach. So what we'll actually do is we'll go into breakout rooms and start thinking now if you want to volunteer, because we've got a couple of scenarios coming up, and we'll just get some answers from you. But I'm going to give you a small framework to how to answer these kind of "what would you do" type questions. So firstly, you need to identify what the underlying issue is. So with professionalism, it could be anything from a colleague is drunk to you catch someone stealing, or anything like their health might be affecting their performance at work. Lots of things that you might witness in hospital. So you need to identify what the issue is. So is it a knowledge issue? Is it a trustworthiness issue, one of those 4 areas that we talked about. Then, so for the ranking type questions, then you need to start ranking the questions in order. So I would always start with the top question, then the bottom question, and then for the middle type questions, just obviously then go to them. And always talk through as you're doing them what your rationale is, because the interviewer will be, if it comes to these ranking type scenarios, the interviewer will be asking you, but also challenging you. And it's important to, when you are challenged, not take it personally and not take it as you're necessarily wrong. They're just stress testing your answers. So if they make a good point and you've missed something, be like, oh, of course, yeah, I hadn't considered that. And if that you obviously have made an error or missed something out, then, you know, adapt your answer. But if you have good reasons and strong, valid, logical reasons for why you've put your answer, then don't be afraid to say like, oh, I respect your opinion, but I actually think that this is the best answer. So that's just a test that they will do, just to test your mettle and your ability to cope with being challenged. So yeah, like I say, talking out loud through all of those. Kenji, anything? You're good at these MMI type scenarios. What do you think?
Yeah, so I'd say after scenario, they normally come back with maybe 1 or 2 or 3 questions as to you know, the scenario. So they may ask you, why did you think that? What was your thought process? And I think it's really important when you're done with the whole thing to summarize back to the interviewer what you're thinking throughout all of this. You know, so start from the very basic. You know, you can say I first started off thinking this, then as time went along, this is the kind of tactic I thought would be best with this person. So always try and be able to justify why you did what you did. I think that's a really most important thing is to say, you know, exactly what you're thinking at the time and why you did what you did. Because a lot of the times in these ethical scenarios or whatever scenario you're doing, there is no right or wrong answer. You just have to be able to reason as to why you chose this method of dealing with things. So don't worry too much about all the detail. Just be able to reason as to what you did, you know, and why you did it and what you did. I think it's really important to do as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And just remember the skills that they're trying to elicit in someone when they're asking a professionalism type question, and that is that you can demonstrate that you show professional standards and behaviors, and that you've got good knowledge of the GMC and kind of all the things involved in that. They want, like I say, they'll challenge you, so they want to test your resilience as well. So yeah, so I think now we can take a few more questions. I think now would be a good time to try some scenarios. So Kenji has one prepared and I have one prepared, and we're going to go through those in turn. Now let's see what's the best way to do this. I think the best way would be, I will give you the scenario. Let me just find it. I have a scenario here. Okay, cool. So this is going to be a ranking type scenario. So remember how I said to do it. So please, no one post on the chat for a minute so that it doesn't get lost. So I'm going to put the scenario on, and then what I'm going to do is put you into breakout rooms, right? I'll give you just a couple of minutes just to go through your rationale and talk it over with the other candidates. And then if someone's feeling brave, after that, we'll get someone to just go through their answer and tell us the ranking and their rationale behind the ranking, okay? So it's 8 a.m. and you're beginning a New Year's Day shift. A fellow colleague is called in sick and on the shift, and they said they had food poisoning. The next day, you see photos of them on Instagram from a New Year's Eve party, and that they were at the night before. So what would you do? So what I'm going to do is, you've got the answers there, and what I want you to do, just typical SJT scenario. So remember that you're a junior doctor in this, so it's important to kind of put yourself in that sort of mind frame. And obviously I know that's a bit of a leap for you guys, but eventually that's what you're going to be doing. So yeah, please, well, like I say, go for it. So I'll pop you into breakout rooms now. Cool. Okay, great. So everybody's back now. Well done for having a go and chatting through the scenarios to each other. Does anybody want to have a go at this? So just to recap, it's basically so you're a doctor, you're in your first year of being a doctor, you come into work on New Year's Day, your colleagues call in sick, and then you find out a day later that they've been at a party. Now, who is feeling brave? If you are, unmute and let us hear your answers and what you think, and please tell us your rationale.
Is it okay if I go?
Yeah, of course.
Do I need to put my camera on or anything?
If you want to, you can. Is it Cambrai? Is that?
Yes, first time correct. Well done.
Perfect. Yeah, you can feel free. You don't have to put your camera on. You can if you want. Okay.
Okay, I'm literally just doing this to like practice the interview.
That's exactly what it's here for. So yeah, please fire away.
Okay. So I kind of split this into like 3 tiers in a way. Yeah. So in the first tier of like most appropriate thing to do, I would talk to your colleagues. So like D and B are like kind of together. Like you would have a conversation with them. Because like since you're also FY1, so like you're kind of the same like standing with them, so like maybe you're like friends with them or like maybe you're not.
Yeah.
And then in the middle tier, I would say our letter senior colleague about the photos if like they haven't removed it or like nothing's changed about the situation and like continue to lie or like the situation's gone worse because like a patient has seen them. And then in the very inappropriate tier, I would say make other colleagues aware and talk to FY1 colleagues because that would just spread rumours. And then if the patients hear like gossiping, like nurses and all of that, then it won't look good on like the NHS and all that.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, great answer. So yeah, I think you're very close to having that. So this is a real SJT question, and I'll talk you through the answers as to why. But that was Cambrai, that was a really good answer, and yeah, absolutely. I think you got very close to full marks there, and great. By the way, great justification for it. You know, you've given very sensible and rational answers, and you've clearly gone through that systematically. So well done. Great answer. Kenji, any feedback on that?
Yeah, I think I really like how you divided it into categories. You said this is probably what I'd say is most appropriate, and then kind of like a middle category, and then like a absolutely inappropriate category. I think that's such a nice way of structuring it and dividing it. So a really good way of doing that. And yeah, all of your reasons as to why you chose those things all made sense. So really well done.
Yeah. So going through the answers, I think the thing to bear in mind with this situation is you don't necessarily know that. So the assumption that's laden in this answer, in this question, is that they may have gone out and got drunk and then been hungover and then not wanting to come in. But the thing is that you can't assume that for sure. So, this person might not drink and they might have actually gone home early, gone home at 10 o'clock because they had work the next day and had every intention, and genuinely eaten something at the party, for example, that gave them food poisoning. So the first answer is D, because you want to speak to them directly and kind of gauge whether it is actually, because whether your assumptions are correct, because it's kind of almost worse to assume the worst in people where there could be a reasonable answer for it. Okay, so the first one is D, to seek advice. And then, like I say, so the next best thing is, the next step you want to do is look at the worst thing. And yeah, like you said, Cambrai, the worst thing you can do is stop gossiping to other people about it. Now, so A, obviously just going and telling all the colleagues is not a good option, because it will, it's gossiping and you may be making false accusations that, and it's not resolving the situation. So that is by far the worst answer. Then you get the messy middle and the ones that are a bit trickier. I'll tell you the order and then I can explain them. So D, C, B, E, A. And the reason B is third is because you want to suggest to the colleague that they take the photo down, because obviously it might create a bad impression, but you don't necessarily know again that they have that they have been doing anything wrong, so they've got anything to hide. And then E, which is ask a senior colleague. So you don't want to go straight to a senior colleague and give the wrong impression before knowing the right outcome and what's actually happened. Okay, Kenji, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think the reason why they probably put seek advice from another colleague first is maybe to do with the the thought of teamwork. So it's you're, even if it was a medical scenario, you'd want to speak to your colleague first to see whether or not what you're doing to treat this patient is the correct thing. So I think maybe that's what they're trying to get at, is to seek advice as to what you're doing is correct. And you could in the interview you could say, I would speak to my colleague, and I'd also, ask them to not share this with anyone. I'm just doing it purely to make sure that I'm not making any assumptions, and making sure that what I'm doing is, is possibly the right thing. So as long as you can justify it and make sure you back it up with saying, make sure they wouldn't tell anyone, make sure, and I'm purely doing this to look after the situation. That's probably why they put see a second, but it's quite a tricky one actually.
Yeah, because I'm looking through the written answers here actually, and they're saying seeking advice from colleagues on all aspects of professional life is good practice, but it doesn't really offer any more reasons why that one's better. But like you say, I think sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was going to say, and also what you can do in that situation is not give any details of who his colleague is. So you can say, like, I'm dealing with a certain scenario right now. To do with someone I know, and don't say who it is. Don't give any hints as to it being this person. So you can keep it anonymous, but just say, this is the scenario I'm dealing with. Do you have any advice on what I should do, or do you think what I'm doing is correct? So as long as you add it in, say, look, I'm not going to give any confidential information about this person as well.
Yeah, and
I lost connection.
Yeah. Oh.
Joe, can you hear me now? Sorry, I think I lost connection for a second.
Yeah, you're on red, but yeah, no, right. You're right. I think sometimes just just checking things like, is this okay? Do you think I'm being reasonable? Saying, do you think I'm being reasonable here? And they're probably, if you speak to a colleague about it, they will probably help you think of those aspects that we hadn't thought about, that you might not have thought about, that maybe actually, on the face of it, it might look like they've gone out and got drunk and not wanted to come in, but actually there might be something else going on there that you hadn't thought about. Okay, cool. So, any questions on that?
So someone in the chat actually asked questions. So they said, can you hear me, Ash? Am I lagging in? So someone said, can you use the pillars of medical ethics in this question, such as non-maleficence? Would that be achieved in terms of humiliation, in terms of D? Let's see. Did you see the question they asked?
Yeah, yes. Asking for an estimation of why. So the question isn't really asking about the doctor coming in drunk and treating patients. So beneficence, non-maleficence is related to not harming patients. So arguably, by not coming in, if there's not adequate care, then they could harm a patient. But I think this isn't a case of a doctor either being drunk, and it's about professionalism. It's not really related to harm to the patient, other than their absence might result in inadequate patient care, really.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you could mention non-maleficence, but again, that's more to do with ethics of patients. You could mention it, like Ash said, that this may, if someone wasn't to cover this doctor, then they may end up compromising patient care, and that would result in non-maleficence. But I wouldn't directly apply it to this scenario and kind of go into detail on that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying before, is identify the underlying issue. So here it's a professionalism issue. So yeah, absolutely stick to what the subject is about, okay, with your when you're rationalizing your answers. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we have one last scenario, and that's going to be a role play. Okay, so I'm going to post it on the chat, so please don't put anything on the chat for a minute, just so we don't lose the scenario. And let me make sure that it always wants me to post it to one particular person.
Shall I go ahead?
No, it's okay. I've got it. It's just that that's why it wasn't working, because it was posting to one particular person.
Yeah, it switches sometimes for some reason to me as well.
So, and now it's not. Maybe you can try and post it actually, because it's not working. There you go. Can you see it?
I see now. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. So let's give you a minute just to read the scenario. I'll read it out loud. And if someone's feeling brave, we're actually going to do a role play. Kenji's going to play the part of the other colleague, and you're going to play the part of the medical student, okay? So I'll read it out. You're a medical student on placement in the hospital, and notice that one of your colleagues is putting some drugs into sterile needles in a bag. Have a conversation with him to talk about it, okay? So have a think about the kind of things you want to say, what issues you want to highlight, what kind of rules that they might be breaking. And if someone's feeling brave, you can play the role of the medical student who's basically caught the person in the act, and Kenji will be the thief.
Okay. Yeah, just to highlight, so just make it clear. So yes, I'll be the person you're talking to. So I'll be the friend, and then Ash is gonna be the kind of interviewer in the background. So you'll talk to me as kind of your friend who goes to medical school with you, and then afterwards Ash will give you some feedback on how it went, and I will as well.
Anyone want to have a go? Yeah, sure. Is it Rosette? Rosette, you can unmute.
Hi, yes, Rosette.
Okay, go for it. So just enter. So I will say enter the room and just talk to your friend and explain what you've witnessed, and then go from there. Okay.
Give me a sec. I'm gonna open up a document so I can just write some notes on how things are going, and then so I can give you some feedback after. I'll pin your screen up as well so I can see you. Okay, perfect, Rosette. Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Kenji. How are you doing?
Hi. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good too, thanks.
Great.
I just saw you put, I don't want to intrude, but I saw you put some drugs and sterile needles in a bag. What's happening?
I just needed to practice some clinical skills, so I decided to take them basically.
Oh, yeah, I can understand that. But I think it's against the hospital policy, and it might be a bit dangerous to practice alone. Do you think you should maybe put them back, and we could talk with the course advisor if we need more practice?
I mean, why would it be dangerous if I was going to practice it with another medical student, and one of my friends is also a doctor, so why would that be dangerous?
Yeah, I'm sure you're more than capable. I mean, I've seen you work, but I mean, I think it's like doing it without supervision. Accidents can happen, and then it might cause a problem. So I think it's safer if you give them back.
Yeah, I might think I'll have to think about that, but I don't see why it's a bad thing, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, I can understand that, but if you don't don't try and do something about it, I might have to report it. I don't want to do that, but I will have to. So yeah, I really encourage you to try and give them back.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's that big of a that big of a deal that you have to report me? I thought we're friends.
We definitely are friends, but this has nothing to do with it, because this can put you in danger. Imagine if an accident happens, either the drugs or the needles, or imagine if someone needs them and they're missing. So many things can happen. It's just safer that way.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you knew this, but I am a trained phlebotomist, so I do have like a certificate on taking blood. So I'm really good at taking blood. So I don't think it's it's a danger, to be honest with you.
Do you have permission to take those specific needles?
I don't have direct permission, but I thought I just assumed it's fine because I'm not putting anyone in harm really.
Oh, well, then
I'm trained in it,
well, if you're sure you have, the necessary skills, I mean, it wouldn't be hard to get permission. You could just pop in and ask either a doctor or the school if you can have them. And then it will be, safer for everyone and you'll be covered in case anything happens.
Yeah. I mean, I heard other medical students doing this as well. I'm definitely not the first. I think one of my friends said that it was okay, and I think one of my friends said that a doctor let them do it. That's why, and also the fact that I'm a phlebotomist in my spare time, outside of med school. I think, I don't see why it's a problem.
Yeah, no, I can understand like how you're feeling safe in your skills and confident in your skills, but still, I mean, uh, taking them without permission, it's kind of iffy. It's,
I mean, other than putting, obviously risk isn't a thing. I don't think, because I'm trained at it. But other than that, why else would it be? Why else would it be bad?
Well, there is the idea of professionalism. We're training to kind of be doctors, and we're medical students, and we're trying to hold certain standards. So I feel like stealing, whereas you could have them with permission so easily, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't describe it as stealing though. I'm not stealing it to give myself drugs or sell it for money. I'm trying to practice my clinical skills so I can be a better doctor. So I wouldn't say stealing.
Well, I don't know. It doesn't really matter why you are taking them for, because anyway, you are taking them without permission, and that constitutes as stealing, even if your intentions are really great right now.
Mm. I mean, I'll have to think about it. I think what you're saying does make sense. So I will have a think about it and consider that.
Right. Sure. Okay. That's great.
Mm.
Really hope you give them back so we can just end this here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll start that there. Okay, well then, Rosette, I've just got a few questions for you then. So, what was the professionalism issue in question here?
Well, I feel like taking the needles and the drugs from the hospital without permission is probably breaking the rules of like the medical school. Plus, it's stealing, and that's not really professional in any way.
Yeah. Any particular area of any guidance that you can think of that kind of outlines where the particular area of professionalism that this comes under?
GMC guidelines. Probably.
Yeah. Do you know the name of those?
A good medical practice.
Fantastic. Yeah. And do you know what area within those within those guidelines that this comes under?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, honesty. So it's important for people to be honest and trustworthy.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what do you think you would have to do if you had a chat to him and still, although he kind of considered what you said, if he then went on to actually, you saw him leave and not put them back and you were certain that he'd taken them, what would you have to do next?
Well, if I'm certain that he's taking them, even if I wouldn't want to do it, I'll probably have to ask maybe my course supervisor what to do next, because I'm just a medical student, so I'll probably ask for some advice and who to direct, or if they can just take charge of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question, Rosette, can you think of a time when you firsthand ever witnessed any problems where someone's professionalism has been brought into question? Anything on your work experience, or any times when you've seen any issues relating to professionalism?
Yeah, I think during one of my work experiences in in a hospital in Greece. It was a private hospital. I was having a chat with one of the urologists there, and he was explaining to me a little bit about his job and everything. And at some point, a nurse knocked to the door and came in, and he dismissed her really quickly and a bit rudely, to be fair. And I feel like this was like not really professional, because not only, I mean, even if I wasn't there, it would not have been professional. But there was, you know, a young student there, and she was probably a bit humiliated. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah. Do you want to tell us any more about that?
No, to be fair.
Yeah. So I'm absolutely, like, I'm taking you to the very top of the grilling there, and I was just doing that on purpose. But everybody, give a virtual round of applause to Rosette there, because she did really well, and to Cambright. Cambright answered really well, but just in the reactions, give us a clap for everybody, for both participants there, because Rosette did really, really well. And yeah, sorry, I intentionally gave you a little bit of a grilling at the end. What I was looking for, well, I'll talk through all the fantastic things you did, because firstly, I think you had, when you started the scenario, you had an absolutely fantastic tone. The way you approached it was very empathetic, very warm, and not accusatory. Just, you know, you stated what you saw and just wanted to find out a little bit more. So that was a great, great start. You approached him directly. You gave him the opportunity to do it, to kind of make it right himself. And you were great in the way that you warned that he had to that you may have to escalate the situation if he wasn't to kind of go back on what he said. And Kenji put up a pretty good fight, actually. I think he pushed back a lot. So I think I would have probably conceded by that point, but he kept going. And yeah, I think well done for holding your ground, because you didn't concede and be like, oh yeah, fine, whatever. But I think ultimately what you need to kind of get across is that ultimately it's wrong, and you're doing this as a sympathetic or empathetic colleague who's trying to protect him. Ultimately, if he gets caught and he gets found out for doing that, then you could get kicked out of medical school for stealing. It's quite a serious offence. But what I really loved that you did was you suggested alternatives, and you said it's a simple solution. If you go and speak to the ward manager, they'll probably just let you have them, and then it won't be stealing, and it's absolutely fine. So really lovely. The only thing I say is and you answered it very well. I think you would in that situation have to escalate it because it doesn't seem like it, in the role play that Kenji was willing to kind of actually take action on what he said. So you would have to escalate that. And the final bit that I would say, so well done for the questions. And obviously I started easier and then got more and more difficult as we went along, but you did great to come up with a scenario on the spot like that. Really good, and a great example. And obviously that particular one, professionalism, it's about being respectful to the team, setting an example, and those things weren't done in that situation where the doctor was being rude to staff. So great. And the only thing I would say to improve on that is remember that scare tactic I was telling you. So situation, challenge, action, or action can be what you observed, obviously. The reaction, so what the effect of that was, which is kind of like damaging the team and damaging his kind of maybe reputation in a sense, and giving a bad example. And then what I was trying to get you with that very last question is just to reflect on that and say just a little sentence to say, I've seen that, I've seen the impact that it can have, and I'll make sure to not be like that when I practice medicine, and to be respectful to all members of the team. So yeah, and Rosette and Cambright for that matter, if you guys want to reflect back anything or want to engage in dialogue with us about what I've just said, that's fine. But Kenji, do you have any other comments?
Yeah, no, I think you did really, really well. I obviously purposely tried to make you struggle a little bit, and then I was a bit harsh, and I did roast you a little bit, but I think you handled it really, really well. You know, you kept saying to me like, I understand what you're saying, I understand what you're thinking about, but you know, this is what I think you should do. And I think you held your ground, and then you know, you made sure to be safe, because this really all is about safety. So you made sure you were safe in this whole scenario. The only thing that I'd suggest is to think about the order that you're making these suggestions. So I think quite earlier on you said that if you don't tell someone about this or ask permission, I'm gonna have to do it for you. So I think I'd probably leave that to kind of the last thing to say. You want to really go with the path of least resistance first. So talk about the things you can do first. So maybe, you know, ask them how they've been dealing with medical school. And if you're really lucky, the actor might say to you that, actually, you know what, I've been really struggling. And you can ask them why, and maybe they'll give you some more information about how they've found things really difficult. And then you can start slowly broaching the topic of, you know, the fact that you saw them, you know, taking some needles, and you could, you know, ask them what that was for. And when they start challenging you like I did it, because they a lot of the times they won't just give up, they'll challenge you and say, actually, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong. One thing you could have said is that, you know, I understand that you're trained at this and you feel like you're skilled at this. But one thing also is that, you know, the NHS has quite a limited supply of resources, you know, so if we're all, you know, taking things to practice at home, then that could limit the supply for patients. And that's one thing they may struggle to kind of justify. So that's what I'd say. So start with the least restrictive option. And if they do, if they really don't say that they will, you know, obviously make things right, then you can say that, listen, if you're not going to do it, then you know, I really hope to not end our relationship here and end our friendship here, but I may have to suggest to, you know, the senior that I saw this happening, and maybe you can come along with me and we can kind of discuss it as a three. Also, I'd be careful also with the words, just, you know, kind of picking out on small things here. But I think when you mentioned stealing, that to me was something that as your friend was quite scared about that, you know, because stealing can be quite a dangerous word to use in this sense, because you know, I didn't see it as stealing. You know, I saw it as they may be stealing. They may actually, you know, be stealing and use it for something, you know, bad, like you know, taking drugs and stuff. But they may actually be coming from a good place and actually just be a bit ignorant and, you know, maybe wanting to practice their clinical skills outside of the clinical setting, you know, or in a different hospital. So be careful with your wording there. But no, I think you did a really good job overall, and you're very safe and not judgmental at all. So yeah, really well done.
On that point about stealing, I think you can phrase it in a way that says, look, I know, I understand you probably have your good reasons to do it, and I'm not casting any judgment, but in the eyes of the hospital, or if anybody caught you, they would consider it stealing. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, you can say that in a way that's saying, like, look, I'm withholding judgment, but this is how it will be seen, and these are the potential consequences for the punishment of that. And that is how they'll see it. So
one kind of tactic you can use as well is to try and get them to give up the information. So you could say, look, I really understand what you're saying. Like, that makes so much sense. But what if the consultant, you know, maybe said to you that, you know, there's a limited stock of needles, and we really need those to look after patients. You know, how do you think that might come across? You know, and then they might, if you question them on that, they may say to you, actually, you know what, that actually makes sense. You know, I won't do that. Yeah, and it's kind of a tactic we use in medicine as well. You know, instead of, if I had, let's say, an obese patient and I wanted to help them lose weight, rather than saying to them, actually, you need to go to the gym, you need to you know, have a new diet, you need to do this, you need to do that. So I'd ask them and say, actually, you know, is there anything in your life you think you could do to make a difference? You know, and have them come up with the suggestions, or have them kind of admit what they're doing. So that's another tactic you can kind of use in this situation as well.
Cool. Yeah. So Molly asked, so if they put the items back, we still have to report them? No, I think if you've dealt with it and they've understood, you've made them understand the errors of their ways and how it's seen, then no. And you know, in a ideal situation, they could probably just get those items for free anyway. If they just went to the sister in charge and just said, look, I want to do this just to practice some skills at home, the ward manager or the person in charge might just say, yeah, you know what, just take a couple, but, you know, don't take the mick, sort of thing. So yeah.
Actually,
cool.
I think also just on that topic, on that point, I think if they did it again, you could say that look, if they did it twice and I caught them doing it again, then I would consider reporting them. And also, it's down to you to kind of decide if you feel like they were very honest about it, they apologized straight away, and they said, you know what, I completely agree with you. I'm not going to do it again, and it's not fishy at all, and what they're saying makes sense to you as a medical professional. Then I wouldn't report them. It's only if I thought that it was a really dodgy situation and I caught them doing it again, then I'd consider telling someone about it.
Fantastic. Okay, guys. Well, that's the end of the scenarios. So, as I said, I mean, this is just we're tip of the iceberg here with all the stuff that you can do for preparing. So, I said at the start that I'd give you some resources that you can do to revise for this. And actually, what I've done is made a deal for you guys. I've just finished recording a online interview course. So that will be released in the next week or two. And also, as you guys know, I've got the kind of like A to Z start to finish. And that complements it nicely because, for example, when I went to Medlink, when I was studying, when I was applying for medical school, I'd submitted my personal statement and then went to Medlink to learn stuff for interview. And I learned so much that I should have done back for my personal statement stage. But actually it saved me because it made me realize some of the stuff that I'd missed out and helped me kind of compensate for that in between submitting my personal statement and going to interview. So it's really good to have a overall view. So these two courses that I've made complement each other really nicely. And what I'm going to do is for everyone who came to this webinar, the first 20 people to sign up to it, they're usually £100 each. But for this, I'm actually going to do 50% off, and you can get both for just 50 quid. So it's it's not wanting to go to the bloody, let's see if it does it. Is that on there? Can you see that now? Can you see the link on there now? Oh, yeah, okay, great. So yeah, the first 20 people to sign up to that can get both of those courses for essentially it's 75% off because you're getting 2 for 1 and you're getting 50% off that. So yeah, really good course. Like I say, the interview one will be out in the next week or two, but you'll obviously, if you get it now, you can get it for a fraction of what I'm going to put it out for.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ashley Hilton, the founder of FutureDoc, which is an online course to help you get into your first choice medical school. What I'm showing you now is an interview course that I prepared, which helps you with everything that you need, whether you're doing panel interviews or MMIs, to give you everything to help you prepare. I built this course because back when I was on the interview panels, interviewing students who were applying to medical school, I used to find that some really good candidates would come in and actually really fluff up on some of the trickier questions and unfortunately kind of ruin their chance of succeeding at that interview. So what I decided to do is make a resource to help with that, and after coaching lots of students myself, I worked out kind of what they needed to do and how to help them prepare as well as possible so that they, on the day of their interview, actually did their best and performed really well. So what I've done is made an online course which gives you all of that. So it's all the key 12 modules that you'll need to make sure you do well. Those include things such as professionalism, medical ethics, leadership, and then other things such as the hot topics that come up and how to answer all those really tricky questions that they often ask at interview. On the course we have over 7 hours of online lessons, as well as some real life scenarios from real students doing mock interviews, and I'll take you through some of the ways that they answer them well and not so well. And then finally we've got over 40 questions, the typical sort of questions that come up, and I'll go through them, explain the essence of what they're trying to get out of those questions when they ask them, and give you some guidance towards model answers. What I want to impress upon you from this course is that I can give you start you along the right lines and give you the guide to make sure that you do as well as possible. But it's important that you go away and practice these principles, because that's ultimately what's going to help you succeed at these interviews. But like I say, this will provide everything that you need and a great foundation to start the preparation and set you in the right direction towards becoming and performing really well at interview. So thanks for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you on the course.
For the people who don't manage to get in on the first 20, when I repost this and repost the recording, I'll do another 20 then. So if you miss out on this, just have a look when I repost this. Okay, great. Well, we're well over time, so I think it's time to kind of wrap up. Kenji, any final kind of thoughts or anything that you want to say?
I think just be confident in whatever interview you have. Just try to be as confident as you can be. Even if you're unsure about your answer, just be confident, smile, be happy, and be a likable person. And I'm sure you'll do fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think my closing statements would be: prepare, prepare, prepare. Don't rehearse, but just the more you do, the more you can think of experiences and go through your diary, for example, to remind yourself of the work experience. Rosette, for example, when I asked her about an example, she could think pretty quickly of an experience from her work experience. So it's really important to have those on your fingertips, because you never know what the situation is going to be and what thing you can think of that's going to apply to it. So the more work you do up front, the easier it will be.
And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, we can do questions quickly. There's a lot of
not just now, but even after, just feel free to drop us an email or.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another point actually. Kenji and I are doing mock interviews. So if you want to do a mock interview with either myself or Kenji, we can sort that out for you. And when I post out the recording, I'll give you guys details of how to do that as well. Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. Please, everybody, give Kenji a massive round of applause, claps, thumbs up in the reactions, and give him a big thank you, because he's absolutely amazing, and I really appreciate him coming on today with me.
Always, man. Thank you for having me on as well.
No worries. No, good to see you again. And well done, everybody. And thanks, Rosette and Cambright, for participating. And keep an eye out. I'll post anything new that I do on Instagram about any more sessions like this. So thank you, and I'll see you soon, guys. Take care.